Welcome to The Killer Psychologist. Today we're going to talk about Celeste Rivas Hernandez, who vanished from California in April of 2024 in Lake Elsinore. And now, in September of 2025, she was located deceased in a car, in the trunk of a car in Hollywood. Now, that car it's registered to David Burke, or D4VD. So what happened? With me, I have killer expert William Noguera. We're going to talk about this case. And I always think about if something happened to me, if I'm D4VD, right, and somebody finds a body in the trunk of my car, what are the next steps that you would recommend for someone like this to do?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on again. If I am David, I hire an attorney immediately. And this is the United States. When you hire an attorney, it's not an admission of guilt. What it is that you're doing the smart thing. Any attorney will tell you, don't speak to law enforcement unless you have legal representation. And there's a reason for this. Law enforcement is trying to close a case. Anything you say can be used against you. The Miranda tells you, when they read it to you, they're telling you everything can and will be used against you. That should tell any person, shut your mouth, get legal representation, and then say, okay, the attorney will decide whether he wants you to speak to them. And if you do, he will be present or she will be present right there in front so they can stop anything or say, hey, we're not going to answer that question, because these questions are very leading. There are some circumstances in this case that are undeniable. Number one, she was found in the trunk of a car registered to David. That doesn't mean any wrongdoing on David's part. We know that when the car was found, he was on tour. He's a world-known gamer and influencer, and now he's a pop singer. So he has a very hectic schedule. But we also know that the car had been sitting there a very long time. We also know there are certain circumstances that can't be denied in this case. Was there a relationship between the two? They obviously knew each other. It doesn't say that he was having a relationship with her, but it also doesn't either. The LAPD is investigating this case. Recently, they've executed a search warrant at the house that was being used by the singer. The property owner hired an investigator by the name of Steve Fisher. Steve Fisher has located a number of videos from the houses surrounding the area. So we know that the car was parked there. They also have video of what looks like people who actually left the car there. So the LAPD is actively investigating this. My, advice is don't talk to authorities until you have an attorney with you. When I was arrested for homicide in 1983, I did not have an attorney, but I knew enough that when they said, would you like to talk to us? My answer was, absolutely not. It was that simple. I said no. And there was nothing used against me at that time because I was unwilling to speak to them. I'd already been charged, so why speak to anybody? That's what someone always has to keep on your mind. Now, he hasn't been charged or anything. There is absolutely zero evidence that they're going to be arresting him. But I believe he should get an attorney and be very aware of what questions he answers, because a lot of misinformation out there online. I've looked online, and there are all kinds of speculation. There's all kinds of people talking about this, including us right now. And this is the reason I'm being extremely reserved about talking about a young man's life that is at stake here, because if he says the wrong thing, and he could be absolutely innocent, it could be used against him and it will ruin his life.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with you about the first step is getting an attorney. And in cases that I've worked on where someone talks to investigators or the police and it's recorded and they share things, it can be a fatal mistake in the case, and you can't undo that. And if you get an attorney, your attorney is going to tell you to shut the fuck up. They're going to tell you, do not talk about this case at all to anyone, especially going on social media, going out there and making statements. Your attorney can make statements on your behalf. And so everyone is so curious right now because it feels like it's a radio silence, right? We haven't heard anything. I mean, behind the scenes, we're getting information on the internet. So in this case, hiring a private investigator. So that would be something that I would do personally if this was me in this situation, I would hire a private investigator.
Well, I'd hire the lawyer first. Let the lawyer get the private investigator. Competency is everything in these cases. You can hire an attorney, but if he's a dimwit, you're going to get screwed. You have to have the right attorney. Of course, David has the ability, or at least has the perceived ability to afford a good attorney. I'm sure he'll have someone that is competent, but it's all about perception too. If you're perceived, or your perception is, look, I'm innocent, I haven't done anything wrong, and you go to the law enforcement and you talk to them willingly, it depends on their perspective. If they're looking at you like you're the guy and you're there trying to cooperate, more than likely you're going to get screwed. The attorney part of this is the most important part, because the attorney, as you mentioned, can speak for you and it can be used against you. But if you speak, remember the Miranda rights, everything you say can and will be used against you. Stop talking. Shut your mouth. Allow an attorney to evaluate whether you should speak to authorities or not, and at what time and in what location. Very important, because at the beginning of these cases, this is what makes or breaks a case against a person. And it could be devastating that you said something trying to cooperate, and yet you just put a noose around your neck.
And then guess what? You get a knock on the door and you get arrested and you're detained. And I've seen this in so many cases. After talking to the police, making statements, they come and arrest you, and then you're detained, you're in jail, you're in custody. And what if the judge says no bail? And then what? Like, how do you handle your case when you're locked up? It's a lot more complicated.
Sure. Being incarcerated, now you're in a position where public perception becomes everything. If you get arrested for the homicide of a child, because let's make no mistake, Miss Rivas was 13 years old when she left home. That is a child. She was 14, more than likely, when she became deceased. We don't know how she became deceased. Overdose, suicide, natural death, got hit by a car, could be a shotgun. We don't know, because the body was so, the decomposition of the body, from what I have read, and I have no insight into this case beyond what's being put out there. I'm not officially on the case. I have not been asked to come on the case, but I do know that the body was not in one single piece. I know that the body was dismembered. Now, could that have happened because of the time that it was in the trunk? Possibly. Unlikely. So we have obviously something happening after the death that suggests a crime. Now, could someone panic? Someone overdoses. You're there. They're underage. Now you're thinking of ways to cover? Absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of things going on here. This young man may not even been near this car or near this house when this took place. There are a lot of people associated with these type of celebrities that could have easily been responsible for this. Or no one in his camp could have been responsible. He is in the car. The body was found in his car, or at least the car rented to him. Again, there could be a very simple explanation of this. And the reason I'm being so cautious with this is because a young man's life is at stake. And I look back at when I was arrested as a 19-year-old boy, thrown into the legal system, and I had absolutely no sense of what was happening. I didn't have the funds to hire an attorney, or at least I did have an attorney, but not one that was worth beans. The person was incompetent, and look what it cost me. 42 years in prison.
You had a public defense.
Well, in a way, I had a retained attorney who was a divorce attorney. So again, a very incompetent person who had no idea about Orange County, the conservative viewpoint, and how to deal with a case of special circumstances, which I was charged with, which was financial gain. 42 years later, that claim was found to be untrue. But I waited 42 years to get what I would say is a bit of justice at the end, because I served 42 years. So it's critical to have someone, an advocate, that's going to help you. And this case has a lot of attention. You have a girl from Lake Elsinore. She was reported missing in 2024 by her family. She's underage. There's a lot of problems for me there. If she is having a relationship with a guy who's 19 or 20 years old, what are the parents thinking? And I'm not here blaming her or her parents for what happened to her. But, I am the guy who always tells people, be aware of your surroundings, be safe, be aware of your surroundings. And one of the things that is important to me is a kid. If you're a 13-year-old child, girl, if I'm her father or mother, I'm not letting my 13-year-old girl go out with a kid who's even 17 years old. She's not dating till she's 15, 16 years old. And if it's up to me, she ain't dating till she's 21. So how a young girl ends up in some type of a relationship with a older kid, and 19, 20 is an older kid. For me, there's a problem there. And I'm not saying the parents are at fault or anybody's at fault. There's a victim here, which is the young girl. But there are things you can do for parents if your underage girl is suddenly dating a guy who's 19, 20, 22 years old. Newsflash, this kid is a walking hormone. Your daughter should not be going out with a guy. Whether he's an innocent guy, a good kid, it doesn't matter. Shouldn't be going out with a kid that's over 18 years of age. And in my conservative viewpoint, my 13-year-old daughter better be playing with dolls in the house with her best friends who are also girls and not with boys that are 17, 18, 19, 20 years old.
I would love to sit down with the parents of Celeste and hear more from them. We do have limited information, but some of the information that's circulating on the media is that she'd run away from home before. There was phone calls to the police, to her house. She had a prior ex-boyfriend. So some people are sort of questioning the home life and what was going on, and who knows, was there a lack of oversight for her? So it's just can make a teen vulnerable, so I'd love to know more about.
Yeah, and there's a call for justice. There's a call to find out who's responsible. I think that LAPD, they're experienced in matters of homicide. It's the biggest department in Cypher by New York in the world. They know what they're doing. Can they make mistakes? Yes, absolutely. Can they accuse the wrong person? It's been done before, but they're being very cautious. You have a celebrity here. I'm sure that they're going through every angle to make sure that when they make a decision whether to charge him or charge someone else, that they're making the right decision. They don't want something like the O.J. Simpson trial jumping off again. Right. They don't want that. Yeah.
I was just thinking of the same case. You think of the police officers, your Mark Furman are the key players in the investigation, and now they're on the stand. So every person that's touching this case in the LAPD, this can be very publicized later. And who's on the case? How is it handled? We think about JonBenet Ramsey. We can think about a lot of past cases, how it was handled, how the case was botched, how years later who killed JonBenet Ramsey? All these questions. In this case, how are we going to solve this case? And so those investigators, we don't know who they are right now. We don't know who's all on the case and what information they know, but it's going to be very publicized. And this could be a jury trial and everybody is exposed.
Yeah, and there's also, look, for the most part, you have sometimes bad apples in any place, whether it be law enforcement or not. But I believe, and this is just my perception, that law enforcement generally has good intentions of making the right arrest, okay? And sometimes the public doesn't like that they don't charge somebody because they perceive this person is guilty. But the LAPD or whatever police department is doing it actually is doing the internal work. They know what's really going on in the case. And they don't tell you and I or the public because it's not to their benefit. If they put everything out there, it's easy for someone to fake like they didn't do it. But usually when they make mistakes, like the killer, things only the killer knows, and they expose that during an interview, the police know we didn't put that out there. So obviously he knows something. So these are things. Look, investigations should be kept quiet, at least in the issue. After 10 or 15 years, then sometimes it's not a bad idea for other people with fresh eyes to come in and take a look at the case. But right now, this is the most important part. In September the 8th, the car is impounded. A couple of days later, I have the dates wrong, they find the body. This is a relatively small time. The autopsy alone is going to take weeks or even months. I don't even believe that we have an autopsy yet. That autopsy is going to answer a lot of questions. Was there an overdose? What was the cause of death? Circumstances of death? DNA, if there's any there. The surveillance cameras of the house where they were staying at. Was she ever there? We don't know. The investigator, Steve Fisher, says there is no evidence that she was at that house with David. We've looked at the film. It's not present. They do have a picture of her in January of 2024. The beginning of this year was the last known photograph of her. So we don't know what happened there, if anything. A lot of questions. I'm sure law enforcement is mulling over these questions, or they already have the answers. And remember, there are different branches working here. You have the LAPD who does the investigative work. They don't charge anyone. It is the DA's office in LA County that does it. So the police officers gather the information, they give it to the DA's office, and they say, hey, this is what we have. We believe X, Y, and Z. Then it's up to the legal team or the attorneys of the DA's office to sit down, look at the case and say, hey, is it only circumstantial? Can we make this case? But more than anything, can we charge someone and we're actually going to win the case? Because if they charge someone and he beats the case, you can't charge him even though the next day he says, yeah, I did it. So they have to be sure what they've done, what they're going to do, and how it plays out in a court of law.
Exactly. And, so I'm curious, this private investigator, Stephen Fisher, he has some video surveillance of an individual driving the Tesla car. And so I'm assuming he knows who is the driver of the car, but I don't know that he's publicly said who it is. He's protecting the
He has not. And there's a reason for that. Now, I know that Mr. Fisher is being extremely cautious of what he does, because he is now, from what I understand and from what I've gathered from him directly, and that is that he turned over every bit of surveillance that he has or has acquired to the authorities, to law enforcement. He's also said, and he won't divulge this, whether they already had that or not. He wanted to make sure that they had what he had. Whatever he knows, law enforcement also knows. They have not made a public move because maybe they are gathering information. Maybe they are preparing the case. And I believe that's what's going on. They're preparing a case against someone. We don't know who it is. Speculation online, David's involved somehow because, well, there was found in a case in a car with Texas plates that was registered, or at least the paperwork ties to him. But that doesn't prove anything other than there was a body found in the car. There's speculation about a relationship that he had with the young lady. What was that relationship? We don't know. So it's very difficult to speculate because LAPD has not given that information up. And I've looked and I've asked questions. They're not budging.
Yeah, they don't want to botch this investigation. So I think fans are pointing out some of the lyrics in his songs, and it's hard not to look at these lyrics. Like, in the back of my mind, I killed you. So just certain things in his lyrics that they're pointing out. And of course, that doesn't imply guilt, but there's other information about matching tattoos and, were they in a sexual relationship? All of this information, what is true? And
so let's talk about some of those circumstances. The tattoo that is the SHHH, like be quiet, that actually comes from Rihanna. Rihanna, the singer, the pop singer, has the same tattoo. And it's popular among pop singers, their fans and stuff.
I didn't know that. Where does she have the tattoo?
She's the one that came up with it. She has a tattoo on her right hand index finger as well. And that's what, I don't know Rihanna, but of course, this is what I've gathered from the sort of the investigation that I've done. And it's a popular tattoo. Whether it's relevant to the case, we don't know yet. But it's a piece, right? We have to look at the piece. Okay, it's there. What does it mean? We don't know. Was there a sexual relationship? No one knows that. We don't have DNA. We don't have accusations. We don't have anyone making these accusations. Now, there's a huge problem for me, and I'm looking at this from the standpoint that the LAPD would be looking at it, the DA's office. So she runs away from home. We don't know the reason for it. Obviously, kids don't run away from home unless there's an issue there. And maybe there wasn't. Maybe she was a kid that liked to run away. There is enough evidence to suggest that the parents, or at least the brother, knew that there was a friendship between her and the pop singer. So she disappears. They filed a missing police report. They knew about this alleged relationship or whatever it may have been. If I'm the father or the mother, I'm driving to LA and finding out, hey, have you seen my daughter? What's going on with this? There's a lot of missing pieces and holes here that I'm not comfortable with on the part of what I would do as a parent. What I would do, and I'm sure that the LAPD knows the answer to this question. You file a police report in Lake Elsinore, it's Riverside County, or San Bernardino. And there is at least evidence to suggest that she knew this person. If I'm the parent, I go to LAPD and I make this complaint when she disappeared. I don't wait until they find the body. Now, this is not saying that they didn't, but we don't know about that. There's a lot of unanswered questions to this case that bothers me on both sides. And look, and I'm a straight shooter. I'm going to tell you right away what I think. This is what I think. And it bothers me. I sat last night while I was reviewing all my notes on this. And look, I could do what most people do online, which is then jump on the bandwagon to accuse this kid of it or accuse the LAPD of not doing it quick enough. I'm not going to do that because, first of all, it's unprofessional. Number two, it's all speculation on my part. I don't know anything that either side is doing that's wrong. This could be an innocent young man who is in a bad circumstance, and it could ruin his career if he makes a false move. I suggest he gets an attorney. Now, on the same token, there are problems with this case in reference to what's being done. I believe in a consistent patterns of behavior. If I have something to hide and I'm, a family member or whatever, I do exactly what they've done. They file a police report, but they let it sit. I begin to push the issue. I saw a very disturbing video last night on YouTube, and it was someone had used AI and they had created the image of Miss Rivas, and she's talking to the audience. She was talking to me. Obviously, it was AI generated, but she says, don't let my name be forgotten. Don't allow my death to be forgotten. Answers need to be made. Please find who did this to me. It touched me. I'm gonna be honest, it pissed me off. I thought, what the hell? Obviously, someone who cares about her put that out there, and we're not supposed to forget who the victim is here. Whether she was, a child who did run away from home, whether she had problems or not, whether she had a bad home life, it's irrelevant. The relevant issue here is that she's a victim of a homicide. Well, possible. She's dead. That is what's the truth. We don't know the circumstances. I hope we do. I hope that the coroner's office issues a statement of cause of death so we know more about it. But it touched me. That video really grabbed me.
Yeah, I can't imagine what the parents are going through. I'm a parent of a teenager. I cannot imagine. But I want justice for Celeste.
Yes, I do too. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the most important thing is justice for her. But at the same time, we can't lose sight that there are people involved in this that may be completely innocent, and we shouldn't judge them people based on what's online. A lot of things online about me is not freaking true. Do I care? I don't really care. But at this point, I have thick skin. And I don't have a career as a singer. I'm not that talented, right? But be careful of what and who you accuse until you have, it's like the gossip. It's like gossip in a high school. Everybody gossips online. You see all these programs are gossiping and they're suggesting, and they only go so far so they don't get sued.
Right.
That's wrong. I mean, Jesus. Yeah, it's bad. I would not want to be in the shoes of this young man. With so much circulating about what may be true, what may not be true. You got all these freaking true crime so-called specialists and diving into this thing and weighing in on guilt or innocence. And I like to say neutral. We could talk about the case, but let's be fair to both sides because that's what we're looking for, right? We have to be impartial. I could get a lot more viewership if I start accusing this kid and giving you my perspective of why I think he could be. That's wrong. That is absolutely freaking wrong. And of course, we're not going to get as many views as those, but man, there's a bit of responsibility when you do these type of programs where we have a responsibility to the truth, don't we?
Yeah, ethically, I'm a licensed psychologist, so I have a whole ethics code. So I have limitations, so I can't just publicly, diagnose someone or make these accusations. I like for this podcast to share what I can really do in a case for people, right? You can actually retain me, and whether it's for jury consultation. In any criminal case, I believe you should have a forensic psychologist to look at psychological factors and see how the jury will view this person. Or I do psychological testing on the defendants, and I will let the attorney know psychological factors about their client, things that maybe we don't want to come up in trial, or things that are mitigating, things that are aggravating. In a lot of cases, I'm court appointed to do a psychological evaluation for a defendant, right? And that can go to the judge and the prosecution, and right. So I always think about my role in these cases and how I can help. And so we know the attorney on this case. And fortunately for David, he has money to afford one of the top attorneys, and Blair Burke. And so, these are attorneys that I would like to work with together on a case. And frequently I'm hired by the defense in cases, and I've found it fascinating. I have an increase in caseloads working for the defense. And so I will tell you, it's not always as things seem. I end up watching body cam footage or go through a lot of evidence, and the devil's in the details. And it's very interesting.
Yeah. Within 3 weeks of my sentence being reduced from death to life, I saw a forensic psychologist. And this is part of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, their entire evaluation of an individual. Before they release you, there's 3 questions that they have. Are you a danger to society? Number 2, do you accept responsibility? And the last one is, do you understand the circumstances that led to that crime? Your causative factor. These are things that I covered, and I received a moderate low to ever reoffend. Within 4 months of that, I went before the California Department of Corrections Parole Board. It was a unanimous decision that I was found suitable. 5 months later, the entire board of parole board members ruled on my case, and it was unanimous to again release me. And subsequently, like 10 days later, I was released. So this is something that I taught in prison: anger management and all these different causative factors, character defects, criminal thinking, Alcohol Anonymous, Narcotic Anonymous. All these classes, you have to understand. You have to what's called internalize what it is that you're learning. So you become a mini psychologist of yourself. That's a big one. If you do not understand your case and why you did what you did, they're never going to allow you out. If you minimize the case, you're never going to be allowed out. The Menendez boys realize great attorneys, they're all over the media. But when they went to that parole hearing, there were 3 things that they bothered the parole board. Number 1, they minimized the case. Hey, I did it because of this reason. They blamed the victim. The answer should have been, I did it. I premeditately did it, and I did it because they didn't do that. Number 2, their record in prison was bad. They were caught with cell phones. They were caught with drugs. They were caught in fraudulent activities with taxes. Those are 3 strikes right there with those. What it tells the board, criminal thinking. That's a problem. And then, of course, there's the elephant in the room, the media. There was such a circus around them that the parole board said, hell no. They denied them 3 years. That means in 18 months, they can go back. Let me tell you, they'll be denied again. There's a reason for that. The criminal activity they're involved in, 5 years have to pass before you're found suitable after you commit a crime in prison. People don't think it's true. Believe me, those guys were teaching and facilitating classes. They didn't internalize it. They knew how to spit it. Oh yeah, this happened. This is why. But when it came down to it, it's a forensic psychologist looking at you. He knows the pattern of consistency in your answers. If you're saying this answer here and another one here, there's not a consistency, it's not internalized, he's going to find you to be a risk, and your risk begins to rise. It goes from low, moderate, and high. The Menendez boys were up in the upper echelon of risk factor. That's why they were denied.
Yeah, and so much the public perception doesn't realize this. So, but, as a forensic psychologist who does these interviews and does the risk assessments and reports, attorneys can talk to me and we can have a plan of action. So let's go back to before you're convicted. So you haven't been sentenced yet. And a lot of times I will do the interview with usually the defendants in custody. So probation does a report also, right? Sometimes seeing if they're suitable for probation. And so here's the thing. Who does what first? So just depends. Maybe probation already did their report and has concluded a certain outcome. And maybe I don't get that report. Then I do my evaluation. So all this is very important, the order in which this happens. So let's just say I do my interview after, and it happened recently in a case. And I think this guy is suitable for probation, and I need to talk to probation. Had I done my report first, it could have influenced probation's report. If I'm saying this person's suitable for probation. So what if we have 2 different opinions, right? And it goes to the judge. So then I end up testifying about that this person's suitable for probation. So all this is really important in some of the factors that I look at, but you are absolutely spot on when you the questions that they're going to be asking you. And on a side note, I would go to the state hospitals and evaluate people ready for release, right? After insanity defense, after people had killed someone. So seeing if they're suitable for conditional release program. And there's information that I'm looking for. But guess what? I get all your records too. So you can pretend to appear a certain way, but guess what? I'm getting all your records. And it can be very revealing about someone's not ready for release. And these are the things that people don't think about, but your records, I get them all. So the Menendez brothers, all those, the things that the public isn't thinking about, but everything that's going on in prison, or jail, because I get the records. And I always tell people if they're in custody, because I see people, right, make sure that you're abiding by all the rules, right, while you're in there.
Absolutely.
The
absolutely.
Statements you are making are being recorded, just so you know. So inmates they'll say, should I go down to medical and talk to mental health staff? And you can. Just know what you're saying to them. It's all measured.
Absolutely.
So,
you're absolutely correct. The jail record is a big thing for anybody that has a parole. Now, if you got 20 years, at the end of those 20 years, you're getting out whether a parole board says so or not. It doesn't matter what you've done in prison. But if you have a life top where a parole board will be making that decision whether to release you or not, it is absolutely imperative that you behave according to the rules. Because if you can't follow rules in prison, how you expect to follow rules when you're out in the general public? And understand, look, you don't have to have a perfect record. While I was in prison on death row, I had physical altercations with individuals who had attacked me. And, well, unfortunately for them, they looked like they got run over by an 18-wheeler when I got done with them. So I had to explain that. The forensic psychologist asked that of me. She said, well, what's going on here? And I told her, look, that happened in 1993. And she said, well, let's talk about that. I said, absolutely. What would you like to know? What were you thinking? And I said, what I was thinking was that I had a reserve. She goes, what do you mean reserve? Well, my reserve has always been that I don't care what you say, but as soon as you touch me, you're going to pay for it. That was my insecurity. It was the ego. It was all these things, the criminal thinking, that I was holding on to that. Hey, I'm okay as long as you don't touch me. That is a reserve. I said, and since then, I haven't had that problem because I've dealt with it. She asked me, what classes you take? Well, anger management, criminal thinking, self-analyzation. I really got to know me, and I understood the person I was. And the next question, of course, you never say something unless you know the answer. She goes, well, who were you? I was a criminal. I was a liar, a manipulator. I was a violent person. I was the person you didn't want living next door to you. She said, really? I said, yeah. So who are you now? I'm pro-social, proactive. I'm a person who cares about his community. I have a different value system. Therefore, I behave differently. But the biggest part of it is that I am a person who understands the consequences of my action. That's all I need to hear. Once I told them that, they knew who they were talking to. They were talking to a person who had internalized rehabilitation. And I was no longer a threat.
Yeah. Everything you're saying is so accurate. And right now I have a couple teen cases in custody, juvenile detention facility. And one of my jobs is determining if they can be released into the community based on some of their charges. Are they safe to be on probation? In one case, I went in and saw the teen, and they had assaulted staff for about 90 days straight. They just every day getting in fights every single day. And they're not safe to even be transported to court. Like they need to be Zoom interview. So, and sometimes people think, that we're not going to look at all these things, but it's not confidential. So all this information can be presented to the judge, and the judge is the one that's making the sentencing determination. And so all your behavior is measured.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. And this is where I hope that judges take this in consideration. When you're dealing with a child, like obviously we're talking about a teen, it's imperative that we know why that teen acts the way that they act. Kids at that age aren't assaulting people or trying to fight everybody if there's not a causative factor, something there that's causing them to act this way. Dogs usually bite because someone has beat them. Children usually act out as a defense mechanism for something that they've experienced, a root cause. I hope that judges, when they're sentencing these children, understand causative factors, root causes, and the character defects that come from those. It's imperative that they not only understand that, but that they apply that into the sentencing. You don't want to throw the key away at a kid who happens to be violent. Let's find out why. Let's talk to this kid. Let's really get under his skin and figure out why he does what he does. People don't act unless they're mentally, they have a mental issue or they have emotional problems based on whatever. Again, causative factors. So let's find out. Let's find out why. It's no different than what a parole board does. They want you to find out why you act the way you do. Internally, you have to understand who you are. Judges should make the same effort when they're sentencing somebody to understand who that individual is, why he acted the way he did. Is he just a bad person? Is he acting that way because of emotional distress? What are and those can be mitigating as well. I think that's where a forensic psychologist like yourself could come in and really, after establishing a line of communication with the individual, the child or the grown-up, understand what he's about and then determine whether those are aggravating or mitigating factors.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, some of these young teens that I evaluate, they are typically abused at home, sexually, physically, mentally, neglect, and one parent's in prison or the other parents abandon them and they're a ward of the state. So they have no parents, no one to go home to. They are locked up. Now, what do we do with them? And these are some psychological issues. Sometimes they could be having a schizophrenic break and they're very vulnerable and they're just getting their medications titrated and they need to stay right where they're at and not transfer to an adult facility. And that's one case I testified on. I said, no, this is a mental illness. They need to stay right here in this detention facility, even if they're aging out. And so some of the most heartbreaking cases are the kids that I see. And what happens is I end up making CPS reports because they report crimes that their parents were doing to them. And so often they're being sexually abused. And now I'm reporting a crime that their parents have committed. So now the child is acting out sexually. And that happens. So a lot of the referrals are sometimes, so should this teen go get treatment or be sentenced to prison? In a case I did recently, I said this teen is still a kid having a psychotic break and acting out sexually needs very specialized treatment. He's just still a kid. But sadly, I've seen just the most horrific ways that someone could be abused and they need treatment or they need safety. They need structure and supervision. And it's just really sad. So one of the things I just wanted to also say is some counties don't have the budget for a psychologist. And so no one's doing this in these cases.
Yeah, well, think about that. You hit the nail on the head. Think about it. A child trusts his parents. A child trusts those who are adults. And those adults are taking that trust, they're manipulating it, and they're abusing this child. This child is going to build up a character defect, which is to how to protect himself, usually through violence. Sometimes they become promiscuous. There are a lot of factors here that you're hitting right on the head when it comes to kids. Even adults, because if that is never rectified, that child grows to be a different person that could be looked upon as a cruel person, an angry person. Well, why was that to begin with? Why did that child become the man that he became or the woman that she became? These are the things that have to be done. And I think that's where a forensic psychologist comes in and really shines a light in a dark place. And sometimes, like you mentioned, having to expose a parent for doing the things he's doing to a child is horrific. But the most important thing is the child's safety. We have to make sure that child is safe. First and foremost, to hell with the parents. If they're abusing that child, shame on them. Get the kid out of there. But unfortunately, we have foster care. We have a lot of places where children go from one place and they're being abused. So the system is not perfect. This is why it's important for people like you to be in the courtroom when judges are making these decisions or DAs are making decisions or defense attorneys are making these decisions, so they're informed on what's really going on rather than guessing and just doing what they feel is correct. And they have no idea how that really plays out in life. And I think that's where, Doctor, your expertise is invaluable.
And one of the ways that I've seen how I can help is, again, we talked about get a good attorney. An attorney can even for indigent folks. So we're talking about this case with David. He has a wealth and access to the finest attorney and legal team. But even if you don't, so I'm seeing more public defenders use forensic psychologists. So you can request to the judge to have a forensic expert to assist the defense. And I'm getting a lot of cases like that. So I am able to help the defense look at psychological factors that are in this case that are really important, because we don't want wrongful convictions. And we have to look at some of the mental health factors. And so this is kind of the behind the scenes stuff that people don't always think about. But, the justice system is certainly flawed. And as a person that evaluates people who are being charged with crimes, I would say, get a good attorney, get a good forensic psychologist. You need a good legal team, right?
No, I agree. I agree with you 100%.
Once you're convicted, once you go to prison, try undoing that. Talk to William Noguera. Like, he knows all about it. Pretty hard to undo, if not impossible.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Yeah, no, that's the big one. It's easy to get in the system, not so easy to get out. And I'm living proof of it. 42 years in prison, 40 of those years on death row. I was incarcerated from 1983 until 2025. Yes, I was released 96 days ago.
96 days.
Yes.
How are you adjusting to this freedom?
Actually, quite well. I mean, after being at San Quentin's death row for all that time, when you walk to the yard and there's people being murdered and shot and stabbed and all the stuff that goes on, this is, honestly, it's a cakewalk. I have the support of course, family and friends. I went to prison and I spent all those years studying serial killers. I became an expert at that. I spent my time in the law library trying to understand the system, and I learned to speak. I spent hours watching the daily news every day, watching and making sure that I could speak at a level where people would understand me. And I think it's been fantastic. I also, I want to credit the people who have supported me in the system. I am with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, which I'm in parole under, and they have been supportive. They've embraced that I'm a bit of a different cat, that I'm an author, I'm a podcaster. They're okay with that. They know that I'm doing well. I'm what the system is supposed to do for you after so many years of educating yourself. And it's almost like, look, the system is there in some ways to help you, in some ways to condemn you. Be informed. Have the right people in your corner. Make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to you. Education, education, education. And if you don't have it, get an attorney that does.
And people can hire and retain you to consult. And in many ways, but in one of the ways is if someone is sentenced to prison and they are going, you can help them, right?
Absolutely.
Understand how to navigate the prison system.
The California system is very complicated. You have to know what prison to go to, what yard to go to. There are mainline yards that are okay. There are S&Y yards. There are different categories. If you have a sexual predator case, you don't want to go to particular prisons. And they're going to ask you, where would you like to go? And if you don't know this information, well, I want to go there, you end up with a knife in your back. There are a lot of different ways to understand the classification of cases, how many points you get. And then ultimately, if you are going to go before a parole board, I can help you understand what to learn in order to be able to be successful in getting yourself out. Big key.
That's awesome. And so I can help too, because the certain risk assessments they use, I have those assessments. I can score them and give you an outcome if I think you're low risk. So attorneys can hire me, consult with me before this individual goes to the parole board, or we can discuss these things we have, right? So we know what that score is going to be. And yeah.
Then one last thing I was going to say was in reference to cold cases, though, and there are many out there. People have reached out to me. There is zero charge, by the way. When there's a cold case and there's victims' families are trying to find the answer, I'm always willing to come in and help. No charge to the families, nothing. I just want to help. if I can bring them closure, finalization, like I did in the cases that were featured in Death Row Confidential, great. That happened to turn into a TV show. We don't normally do that. That's something that's very important to me and very close to my heart, which is to, help victims' families find finalization.
Yeah, and families can reach out to us. And if you have a case that's not getting the media attention, it's not getting that visibility, we can talk about it on this platform to help get justice, and we can discuss it and review all the evidence. And so that's what I want to do with this platform. So
absolutely,
I think we can do a lot of good together.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right. Well, awesome. What should we talk about next week? What case?
That's a good question. I don't know yet, but I would like to close on a particular note, and I discussed this with you before. And what Dana and I are trying to do is make America safe again. That's what it comes down to, where our sons and daughters make it home safely, because the predators, they're now the hunted.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, and also if anybody has ideas for topics or cases you want us to cover, you can connect with us on social media. You know where to find us. Drop it in the comments and share your feedback, things that you're interested in. What can we talk about? Questions that you might have for either of us about our professions, what we do, how you can help. Connect with us. We want to build a community where so that we have a purpose. We're helping out in these cases. So we'd love to hear from you. So thanks for listening to Killer Psychologists, and we'll see you next week.
Be safe. Be aware of your surroundings. Your life could depend on it.
Thanks for listening. For episode details and merch, check out killerpsychologistpodcast.com. And for forensic services, you can book online at psychologydr.com. That's psychologydoctor.com.